Main headlines with the consultant editor of the Daily Mail, Andrew Pearce, and the associate editor of the Daily Mirror, Kev Aguirre. Now, Andrew was ill last week, and it's like they've never seen each other for like about 10 years.
Sadly, it wasn't serious.
That's not kind, is it? He probably gave it to me anyway.
Exactly.
A lot of people have asked, did I have the coronavirus? No.
No, not yet.
I don't think so.
And are they
But if I have got it, Maguire, you're going to catch it.
Are they disappointed when you answer that?
No, because it's not terminal. It's not killed anyone.
Anyway, they're pleased to see each other, is what I'm trying to say. So,
No, he's pleased to see me.
right, okay, front pages.
Leave it, Piercy.
The Metro leads with the Home Secretary Priti Patel insisting that jobs left vacant by foreigners who've been denied entry under new immigration rules will instead be taken by Britons she described as economically inactive. Immigration backlash over British carers is the lead story for The Eye. While The Times reports that Priti Patel has attempted to oust her most senior civil servant after staff accused her of bullying and belittling officials in meetings. The Guardian reports tens of thousands of people in England are in potential danger during winter storms, with 1 in 10 new homes built after 2013 being on land at the highest risk of flooding. The Telegraph leads with a warning from the Chief Inspector of Schools that extra money for education, promised by the government in the budget, is likely to be wasted by poorly managed schools. The Daily Mail reports the post-Brexit Boris bounce is responsible for house prices rising across the UK for the first time in nearly 2 years. According to the Financial Times, the European Commission has proposed that large technology firms like Amazon and Google should be forced to share their data with smaller rivals. Are you going to be quiet? I can't hear myself think. Anyway.
Actually, I can't hear him if you keep talking.
One time, all we're going to do is raise your microphone, and I'm going to sit and be quiet. Much probably.
Don't think you should raise the microphone.
No, I know.
Because Sky will probably be deluged with rips.
Terrible gossipers. Terrible, terrible. Anyway, should we do the papers? Are you ready?
Yes, okay.
Yes, okay. You can chat out there. Okay, fine. Okay. Right, let's go to the Metro. 8 million Brits can fill these low-skilled jobs gap. A number obviously queried by the opposition, but tell us more.
So look, this is the long overdue. It's been talked about ever since we knew we were leaving the European Union, which we are. We have left, you could argue. Free movement of people is coming to an end, although I notice all of the remaining Labour candidates to be Labour leader want to continue it, want to keep it going. They've learned nothing from that general election. So effectively, we're going back to the point system that actually it's not the Australian point system, it's the system that they got from Labour.
The world anyway now.
Yeah, exactly. So basically, it just means that EU citizens will no longer be discriminated in favour of entry. They'll have to compete for places here with the rest of the world.
So is it a political point to make this into quite a big deal then? Is that what you're suggesting?
Yeah, well, it is a change in a sense. These are 27 countries. The free movement was there. It was always qualified. You could stop rapists and murderers coming. If you came and you didn't get a job within 3 months, you could be required to leave. There was no benefit to us, and the government couldn't produce any figures to show that. But you could come and look for work. Outside of Europe, you had to be earning over 30 grand and were limited. Now, of course, what they're doing is they're reducing it really down to 26 grand, lowering it down. But this point system, you need 70 points, 10 if you can, I think it's 10 or 5.
10 if you speak English.
It's English.
10 if you've got A-level qualifications, that sort of thing.
Now, this idea, 8 million Brits can fill the low-skilled jobs gap. Well, under the new qualifying period, figure of 26 grand, well, nurses start on less than that. Are they not skilled? Yes, they are. Radiographers in the NHS, somebody was pointing out, they start on less. So these are skilled jobs. Actually, they're skilled jobs in agriculture. They're not unskilled jobs. If you've got to work in a meat processing factory or you're on a farm, given all the machinery going on, these are really skilled jobs. And carers are skilled jobs. And it's a terrible undermining of carers by pretending they are unskilled. They are skilled. Now, these 8 million Brits, as people are pointing out, as the Metro does it, long-term sick, students and carers. We've been told time after time after time by the government that unemployment in the UK is really incredibly low, and it is incredibly low. So where are all these people straining at the leash for these jobs to fill in for those who won't be able to come out? It's just, it's just nonsense.
Because it is really low, but there's still about 1.3 million people unemployed, and there are approximately about 800,000 job vacancies. So there are people there. What I think this is really going to do...
To the
but Kevin, what the most important thing about this is employers have been have been cashing in on this massive expansion of people coming here from Eastern Europe. That figures, the FT had the figures today, the Times had the figures today, 20% reduction by employers spent on training since 2004. That's disgraceful. CBI have gone along with that, served the Institute of Directors, because it saved their members money. So let's get training back up. Let's get training back up, and let's start paying people a better salary.
But Kevin, this is interesting for unions, isn't it?
It is,
want
yeah.
a proper wage pay, which is the point you're making, isn't
Pay
it?
them more money.
So where do they take this forward?
Where you want, where there is undercutting, and there will be some undercutting, but it's not the real reason wages are down. The reason wages are down is we have very much a deregulated labour market with trade unions quite weak and shackled. You shackle
Wages
them
going back up again
more.
now, actually.
The minimum wage isn't high enough. It should be 10 quid or more, rather than where it is now. You get a lot of contracting out, which cuts wages. Privatisation cuts wages. You don't have enough enforcement of the laws that exist. These are all ways you can push up wages, but you don't back any of that. The only time you're concerned is when you can blame migrants. That's the only time.
I'm blaming employers. I'm blaming the fact
employers
employers have deliberately exploited this massive influx of cheap labour from Eastern Europe. They've paid them less. They're continuing to pay them less, and they've not invested in training. And they'll have to now.
If wages go up, we will all pay, won't we? Consumers, by whatever it is we are consuming, we will all have to pay more.
Profits in the commercial, the private sector are doing pretty well, actually. Profits, so they can pay more money. Get on with it.
Right, so we'll have stronger trade unions to enforce it. Stronger enforcement of the law.
Why do you need stronger trade unions? If employers can't get the staff, they'll have to pay them more money.
Yeah.
They'll have to pay them more money. We don't need your brothers in the trade unions to screw it all up again like they did before.
Right, if this is a long-standing point system, has it been working well? Is something we can judge clearly? Is it worth hanging on to and sticking with it in this way?
With a 30,000 figure, and there's been complaints of, for instance, IT workers haven't been.
But there's been real lobbying about this.
They have now.
But they've lowered it.
I'm all for improving training and giving people an opportunity here, particularly people in communities, including white working class boys and girls who need a lot of help. I'm all for that, but don't actually go after migrants. They come in, they do an important job. They pay taxes, they put more into the system than they take out. And all of a sudden, just having a go at them, you are going to create problems, particularly in sectors like care.
It has caused problems in communities where people feel that social cohesion has broken down completely, because people feel they're living in an alien town and city because so many people have poured into these towns. And it's been a problem, and it's not been well managed, and it's caused resentment, and it was a factor in the Brexit referendum result. A factor, not the factor, but a factor.
Public services.
But a factor.
The NHS has had the tightest squeeze in its history.
Schools have had cuts. Kevin, hang on. 3.5 million people have come in from Eastern Europe since 2004. You couldn't build the houses and hospitals that needs in that time. You frankly couldn't. And they're not paying enough, because they're being paid rubbish low wages. They're not paying the tax revenue either.
Labour under Gordon Brown, when in government, had a social cohesion fund to put money into areas where there was an influx of migrants. You scrapped it.
Well, the best thing is we won't have this great influx now, and then we won't need the social cohesion fund.
Right, we will no doubt return to that at 11:30. Let's move on in the meantime, shall we? Posturing by the European Union over this Canada trade deal.
Do you remember how get Brexit done and it's all sorted? It's not, is it? We all know it's not. It's just a bit of propaganda from Johnson. It kind of worked for him in the election, sadly. But no, this is over. I mean, there is a standoff here now where
it's inevitable.
The Tory government is demanding a Canada-style deal,
which we were offered at the beginning,
hoping to have no tariffs.
We were offered that.
But the EU is saying no, you can't.
Mind.
And there's 450 million of them in 27.
Yeah, they've changed their mind.
And we're one country in about 65.
So
in those negotiations,
because they're just being difficult.
In those
and what they haven't realised is there is a big difference now between the negotiations they conducted with Mrs May and Boris Johnson before the general election. He's got a clear mandate, a big majority in Parliament, and he will take us out on the end of December, whatever they like, whatever they think. So we could have a Canada deal or not. It's really up to them. They wanted a Canada deal, the EU, and now they've changed their mind. But suddenly they can see that Britain might actually get one.
What are you going to do? Send a gunboat? You're sounding like some old colonial leader.
We've left the EU. You lost the argument. You're still losing the argument.
You impose trade barriers, tariffs. Not only the
It's up to the
bureaucracy, but
EU.
the money.
It's up to the EU.
You
They
will
sell-
run down manufacturing in the car industry in particular, given the way it works. Pieces going over borders all the
They
time.
sell us a lot
Take
more
back
than we
control
sell
to
them.
wreck industry.
They're going to have a big problem, and the Germans will be getting very, very jittery. Their economy is now almost in recession.
Right, let's go on to The Guardian. Mr. Trump and Julian Assange. Very interesting.
This is a very interesting story with, of course, Julian Assange fighting extradition to the USA. I back him on that. He should have gone to Sweden.
Sweden, shouldn't
He should have gone to Sweden to answer those charges. That was his big mistake.
Charges were dropped, obviously, there.
Finally, after he hid in the Ecuadorian embassy in London
How long was he in there
for all those years, was it 5, 6, 7 years? Anyway,
Disgusting.
he says he was visited and told if he agreed to say the Russians hadn't taken part in the US election, then he'd be offered immunity. I mean, that is amazing. Alleging the former US Republican Congressman Donna Rohrabacher,
Who I've never heard of, and Donald Trump said he's barely heard of her either.
but Trump. The problem with Trump is he can't believe a word.
Yeah,
he
well, but
says.
can you believe a word Assange says?
No, you've got to
either?
challenge it.
A man who evaded justice.
It's
was
quite a claim,
fugitive.
though.
It
It's
is.
a big claim. His lawyers say they can bring evidence to sustain it, to sustain the claim. Let's see.
Well, let's see if he was visited. If there's any evidence, Donna Rohrabacher, or however you pronounce it, I'll leave it to you.
Well,
anyway, the former US Republican.
Rebecca and man, yes. So there we are. But apart from that, it's a minor detail.
Let's see if there's any evidence.
Man.
Oh, it's a man, is it? Oh,
Because certainly
thinking Dana the singer.
certainly that would, the embassy would have been monitored. Really.
Dana the singer.
I mean,
Yeah.
there's a person, right? It's quite funny though, but this is serious at the same time.
No, I mean,
She's better known than that senator. Frankly.
Yeah, me.
the point is,
It's like sitting next to a Trump mini
Well,
me
it's
now.
true.
I know.
Isn't it?
Trump said, "I don't think I've even heard of this congresswoman, man."
But Trump.
should
I
we
think
move
we
on?
should we just sing the song by Tanya? See if people remember it.
Don't forget.
Eurovision with it, you know.
Beam me up.
It's a long time ago.
I know.
Don't forget Kay Valley back tomorrow morning, obviously.
I'll be watching.
Speaking to Baroness Amos, formerly the UN's Emergency Relief Coordinator for Syria. Full coverage from Idlib tomorrow on Sky News. But Kay on at 7 till 9 tomorrow morning. Plenty more here tonight too. You'll be glad to know. We now know when Harry and Meghan will begin to make their exit from the House of Windsor. More on that after this. Which is really serious parts of their branding for America.
It will. It'll cost them a fair few bob that when they pop around all these big banks.
Paying them or not, but nevertheless, you meet a lot of people with a lot of cash. And what it really is I remember Tory Boy said this at the time. It is the Queen. It might be his grandmother, but she is steely and has a backbone.
Got to protect the monarchy, hasn't
Yeah, well,
It's a brand.
Technically,
It's the brand. Yeah. And it's also, it's part of the law of the land too, that you can't, it was agreed at something called the Paris Convention decades ago, where certain things you can and can't use to describe products, and the Royals is very part of it. Now, they are not going to be called the Sussex Royals, and that will be a huge blow in America, where they worship anything to do with royals.
Why don't they take the titles away, the Duke and Duchess of Sussex?
Well,
if they're not
Because
here
he's a
doing,
royal. Because he's a royal duke. He's born. And a royal duke is higher than a prince.
That's how it works,
And
isn't it?
he is the son of the next king. But HRH is in cold storage, and I think the only reason they haven't stripped it away from them completely is because there will be a suspicion and a hope in the palace that he comes back. Whether he comes back with her is another matter.
But this is on the front of the Times. I somehow suspect that firm, the royal family, are happier this is on than the Duke of York, Prince Andrew, because that his 60th still today. Very,
60th
very
tonight.
unhappy birthday.
Yeah.
Go and see the FBI, mate.
Because
that is a real scandal.
The bells of Westminster Abbey chimed today.
For a paedophile's friend who's wanted for questioning by the FBI.
Do you think?
Well, hang on. He's not.
Right.
If they want to talk to him as a
witness,
not as a suspect,
but they want to question him, and they say they've had zero cooperation.
Which he denied straight after that.
He did.
Well, no, a friend did, but there was no official statement
But this
denying it.
is
You know why,
part of the
though?
problem for the royalty. They can't defend themselves.
But you know why, though, as well? That Buckingham Palace no longer answers to Prince Andrew. If you ring Buckingham Palace and say, Prince, they'd say, we can't help. He's been thrown out.
Is the paedophile's friend in?
What I was going to say is, do you think our next story, which is Caroline Caroline Flack, has helped understand the decisions of Harry and Meghan.
No.
Basically saying, can't deal with this anymore.
No, I don't. I think she's an incredibly complicated woman who had all sorts of issues, and there's a variety of reasons will contribute to why she took her own life. But social media, she lived on social media, unlike Harry and Meghan.
Well,
she had 2.5
and the press
million,
as well.
She had 2.5 million followers on Instagram, and I think it's very significant that when she won Strictly in 2014, you would think she was at the peak of her powers. She gave an interview to a newspaper, where she said she was deeply depressed because her relationship had gone wrong with her.
I know this is incredibly sad. This is the Metro version, and it is the Instagram message that wasn't sent, and her parents have released it, in which she says, I've been having some sort of emotional breakdown for a very long time. But she does say pictures from the alleged crime scene, which was sold to a newspaper and had featured her own blood. But I remember the Sun did that. There is some criticism of using that picture, and I think it's a knee jerk just to blame papers. I think it's a knee jerk just to say nothing was wrong. But here I think it's far more complicated when you have a court case with a very troubled woman who's lost a £4 million contract, is really baited by trolls, had all that problem with the One Direction fans who are having a go at it. I think in a sense, and I've been critical of newspapers myself in the past, I don't think newspapers are why this happened.
But also, you've got to think, on the day she'd been off social media for 7 weeks. She went back on it on Valentine's Day. She would presumably saw a torrent of poisonous bile. That was the same day she discovered the date of her court hearing. She killed herself the next day.
I wouldn't want to blame the CPS, but there's questions to answer because, of course, it's a domestic abuse case.
She wasn't a threat to anybody, was she?
We'll talk about that at 11:30, and Dominic Cummings, eugenics, and all of that too. We've got lots more to pack in. We'll see you then. Thank you. Let's take a look at the weather. To pack in, you've picked lots of stories. So immigration, first of all, the eye suggesting there's been a backlash over British carers, just one of the sectors that might be affected by these rules.
No, absolutely. The eye kind of gets it all there on its front page, including this unrealistic claim by Priti Patel that there are 8.5 million inactive UK adults who could take jobs of migrants who won't be coming here, when of course they're students, carers, long-term sick, and we keep hearing from the government that unemployment has a record low. Then all of a sudden we got this 8.5 million untapped reservoir. Come on, nobody buys that. What I find most appalling actually is this idea that carers aren't skilled, for instance, and that if they're paid less than the 26,000 barrier, then you're not really worthy of a job. Carers are hugely skilled. Actually, nurses start on less than that, and so do radiographers, many other professionals in the NHS. I think Patel has just got this really bad.
Which is why there was so much lobbying to change the threshold, originally set at 30,000 down to 26,000.
26,000,
or even in some circumstances 20,000 was the indication from last night.
The thing is, what they've done is they've recast the immigration system so that no longer free movement of people has ended. Hurrah! Or will end at the end of the year from the European Union. Hurrah! All the Labour leadership contenders want to keep it because they've learned nothing from the general election, in my view. So it means that under this new immigration system, people from the EU will not be discriminated in favour of coming here against the rest of the world. They can all compete.
Net migration into the UK is about 220,000. Two-thirds of that is from outside the European Union. The European Union, if there is a problem, numbers, as you would say, wasn't within the European Union, because the net number was about a third of the total. It was never entirely free movement, because if you came here, you didn't get a job, you could be asked to leave after 3 months. The government could produce no figures on benefit tourism because it didn't exist. You keep out murders and rapists. If you know who they are, you can do that. They've lowered, coming from outside of the European Union, from 30,000 to, it's going to be roughly 26,000, but you're going to create this huge problem on carers, and there will be a backlash. And you know there will be a backlash because people, whether they're being cared for themselves or they have loved ones who are cared, and they're no longer going to be cared, Well, that is a serious social problem. It's a crisis at the moment, and you're going to make it worse.
What
Just going to make it worse, Tory boy.
The explosion of immigration from Eastern Europe, which started in 2004, encouraged by Tony Blair, who ignored all the warnings to have transitional limits to begin with, which is what most of the rest of Europe did, except Blair. He didn't want to. It's meant, in that period since 2004, employers have had a field day. They've paid less. They've not invested in training. Investment in training down 20% since 2004. They can now start paying a bit more, pay higher wages, and invest in training.
Well,
this
costs
will be
which
good.
will presumably be passed on to consumers.
It'll be a better workforce and a better trained workforce. And Maguire, of all people, should be supporting that.
You should be supporting that. Do you back a £10 an hour minimum wage?
Well, I mean,
do you back stronger trade unions?
Do you back
stronger job
Why
rights?
Why do we need a trade union to enforce
Do you back stronger regulation of those job rights? No, you don't. All you want to do is blame migrants.
6 years, when that huge explosion started, what did the trade unions do to improve the work rate, the workplace for people in this country? Nothing. They allowed wages to be driven down. They allowed wages to be driven down by these Eastern Europeans. They drove wages down, and they did nothing about investing in training.
You're forever.
The unions did nothing.
You're forever on other occasions saying unemployment is incredibly low, which it is. Employment rates are incredibly high, which they are, and then you blame migrants. Don't you see the contradiction here?
I don't. And the thing is, although unemployment is at its lowest level since 1973, there are still 1.3 million people on benefits, unemployed, and there's 800,000 vacancies. It can be done.
Elsewhere, we saw 8 million of these people who are fit to work, effectively, but those do include the sick, even some retired. The suggestion was still that was denied by parts of the government. Students as well.
Yeah, and people who are unemployed and vacancies, they're often not in the same places. Like you've got an economy overheating in London and the South East, but you go to the North East of England, South Wales, parts of the northwest, bits of Scotland, it's not quite the same.
Yeah.
So the people in the vacancies aren't in the right place.
Well, in fact, the eye quoting that only 33,000 are described by the Office for National Statistics as discouraged workers out of the economically inactive that Priti Patel was talking about.
Well, she's, look, Patel's own parents may not have been allowed to come to Britain under her system.
Well, hang on, it's the same system that Labour had, Kevin.
Yeah, but
it's the same system. It's the same system.
Your mate Nick Ferrari on LBC was saying
it's the system that the Labour Party devised, which they've now just updated since we got rid of free movement of people. It's a Labour Party system.
It's
a Labour Party system, and I'm glad we're getting rid of free movement, and I'm glad Labour, the leadership tends want to keep free movement because they've learned nothing.
They should defend it.
Yeah, let's move on. Priti Patel saying that business needs to adapt and adjust. We'll see if they can in a short time. Let's move on, shall we, to the flooding chaos. Too little, too late is the Mirror.
I mean, it's all over the country. I mean, and huge rainfall expected tonight or in the next 24 hours, which could be, I mean, the River Severn, and I mean, there's a lot of people having very anxious nights at the moment. Great criticism. Where's the Prime Minister? Well, we know where he is. He's in Chevening, which is the Foreign Secretary's official residence, because look at this, terrible. So people want to see him. Slight problem for Prime Minister. I think he probably should go and see them, but where does he go? Because there's flooding in so many places, and he didn't want to be turning up here for half an hour, then half an hour. So there is a problem, but I think he has to go and show some empathy.
He went to Yorkshire eventually before the election. Why did he go to Yorkshire eventually before the election? Because there were votes, and there was an election coming up. Now he's got an 80-seat majority, 87 really with Sinn Féin. He's not bothered. And I think that says a lot negative about him. He will also remember when he went to Yorkshire, he got stick. And the longer he leaves it, the more stick he will
Politicians getting stick is no bad thing.
The suggestion is offered.
This story is going to run and run, as they say. So Trump, according to Julian Assange, what a choice. Two completely loathsome characters, actually, Trump and Assange. But Assange says Trump has offered a pardon if he would say Russia was not involved in leaking these Democratic Party emails. This was all said in court today, underprivileged. Trump has denied it. It was all done allegedly through a Republican congresswoman who we've now discovered.
Congressman.
Did I say woman again?
And in fact, the copy actually does say congressman there, actually.
Oh, it does actually.
I know, but it is.
Dana Roebuck, I can't pronounce it. Who Trump has said today he barely knew. Now, this guy was a congressman for 20 years, but he was apparently the intermediary between Trump and Assange. And Assange's people say they will provide evidence.
But there was no doubt that Trump and WikiLeaks helped the the Trump campaign because they were against Hillary Clinton because of her role in previous wars, Secretary of State. But of course, actually, I don't think Assange should be extradited to the US. He should have gone to Sweden.
Should have gone on his own accord.
Those charges, I think he made a very bad call himself, hiding the Ecuadorian embassy. He'd have been better off and safer actually
throw him out because he'd become a health hazard.
Yeah. Well, it's just the implications of what
But
it means for
nevertheless-
Trump's policy with Russia. That's
Yeah.
the initial
Well,
thing.
he won't-
There'll be no appetite to go back to
No, there'll be no impeachment. No.
or special
And
counsel.
Trump won't want Russia back in the
But
headlines.
you do want to know what actually happened.
Yes.
You want to know the truth. Harry and Meghan were part of the future of the royal family.
The Fab Four.
And they have gone, and this is a real mess.
It is a complete mess.
As a Republican, you just got to,
They are going to become.
laugh at
They're
it.
going to become a minor. They're just turning into minor royals, and they will be remembering the royals because what they do is history. The Windsors. When the Duke of Windsor abdicated as king, they were determined, the royal family, that they were not going to allow that couple to exploit the royal brand, the royal name, for commercial gain.
I don't think he'll flirt with fascism and Hitler, but nevertheless, how are they going to make their money? We've already seen them get big banks.
They'll still make. I mean, they were going to have things like royal pajamas. I mean, it was just going to be tacky
Do you not think
with the royal crest. Not
people
on.
will have more sympathy for Harry and Meghan and what they claim was social media abuse and press intrusion after what happened to Caroline Flack, which is inside the Metro? Tragic Flack's final post, "I'm no abuser, it was an accident," talking about how her life and her future have been pulled from under her.
I'm not
But do you think there is more sympathy now for people who are enduring this attention and
yes.
toxicity from social media and indeed from newspaper
I think
headlines?
there is, although I think you're putting two very different cases here, and you're trying to.
I am, but
You're trying to do a Venn diagram. I'm not sure exists with a big overlap. This is a tragic story with Caroline Flack absolutely taken her life, and her parents have released this unsent Instagram message in which she said, "I've been having some sort of emotional breakdown for a very long time," and she was a very vulnerable woman. She was part of the media, lived her life in the media. Love Island is all about coverage, all about involving people through social media. Many of them are cruel doing it. But, of course, it was a real court case. It was a real court case, but then we're told she was terrified that camera footage from the police officers would be shown in court and be made public, showing her lowest ebb, covered in blood. She says it was her own blood. But her boyfriend at the time did ring the police saying she was being attacked, begging them to go.
Well, she was charged. It was a public event.
Said in court,
she's a public figure.
The police said it was like a horror movie, and she was afraid she was going to go to prison, lose a £4 million contract forever. I mean, dreadful.
It is a terrible tragedy, but but Caroline Flack courted the media in the same way that Meghan and Harry court the media. She had 2.5 million followers on Instagram. She stopped being on social media for 7 weeks after she was sacked from Love Island after this incident. She went back on Valentine's Day, the same day she discovered the date of her trial. She was dead the next day. She probably read the torrent of poisonous abuse about her on social media. That's where the problem is. It's not the print media, it's social media. It's foul.
I'm often very critical of our trade, but I think not in the case of Caroline Flack. Suicide, the Samaritans say, is very complex, multiple reasons, and I think it's knee-jerk just blaming newspapers.
Okay, beautiful photograph. Last photo.
It's a thing.
We got time to do Mark Zuckerberg having staff blow dry his armpits, which is always
Which is so
famous now.
fascinating. Doesn't everybody
Went
do
on
that,
stage.
Anna?
I have no idea. That's interesting.
Really?
Is that in a shirt or without the
You know
shirt?
that
Anyway,
next
we
week when
didn't
Kevin
have time
comes,
to do it.
he'll
You'll have to read that yourself.
when Kevin goes into makeup next week, he'll ask her to do the same for him.
Deodorant.
I'll see you next time. Thank you very much indeed. Let's catch up with the weather.